23 blind dates in 8 months, and Veronica Hayes had mastered the art of disappearing before dessert. The crystal chandeliers at Laurent's cast fractured light across her untouched wine as she prepared to leave. Another perfect match had just suggested she step down as CEO to focus on family planning. Her fingers closed around the Prada clutch. Then the door opened. A man in a faded work jacket entered, a 7-year-old girl's hand wrapped in his. The child's eyes swept the opulent dining room with silent wonder. Not shy silence, but the kind that settles when words have been lost. She stumbled. Water splashed across Veronica's dress. $5,000 ruined. But no apology came. The father simply knelt, his weathered hands forming shapes in the air. The girl's smaller hands answered back. Sign language. Veronica's chest tightened. She hadn't seen those gestures in 15 years, not since she watched them lower her brother Jesse into the ground. She didn't know it yet, but this carpenter and his mute daughter were about to demolish every defense she'd built from boardroom victories and carefully buried guilt. What happens when a woman who fixes everything meets a man who refuses to be saved? The restaurant hummed with controlled Friday chaos. Veronica sat at table 12, the same table she'd occupied for 3 previous disasters. Preston, the venture capitalist explaining cryptocurrency, had excused himself and wouldn't return. They never did. She reached for her phone when movement caught her eye. The man looked lost, his jacket bearing paint stains that survived multiple washes. The girl beside him barely reached his waist, her yellow dress sharp with store creases. The hostess gestured upward. Wrong location. The birthday party was 1 floor up. But the girl's face had already lit with fascination at the chandeliers. Her father guided her forward anyway, unwilling to disappoint after the climb up the restaurant's steps. The girl's patent leather shoes clicked against marble, her hand slipping from her father's grip as she turned to watch a sommelier uncork wine. Her shoe caught a chair leg. The stumble happened in slow motion, her shoulder connecting with a water carafe. Crystal met gravity. Water arced through the air, catching chandelier light before splashing across Veronica's lap. The cold shocked against skin accustomed to climate control. The dress darkened from champagne to mud brown. The restaurant noise dropped by half as diners turned. Before Veronica could speak, the father dropped to one knee beside his daughter with fluid economy. No panic, no theatrical apology. His hands found the girl's shoulders, checking for injury. Then his fingers began to move, the precise geometry of American Sign Language. His hands asked a question. The girl's trembling hands answered. He signed again, slower, expression gentle but firm. The girl nodded, then turned toward Veronica. Her hands moved. I'm sorry. The universal apology rendered in silent syntax. Her eyes, wide and dark and brimming with mortification, locked onto Veronica's face. The girl wasn't just apologizing for water. She was apologizing for existing in a space where her silence made others uncomfortable, for taking up room in a world designed for voices she didn't possess. It was the same look Jesse had worn before he'd decided the world had no place for him. Veronica's hand moved before conscious thought, reaching toward the girl. The father's head snapped up, weathered features rearranging into guarded suspicion. He stepped slightly, positioning himself between them with subtle protective instinct. His eyes met hers, brown, exhausted, carrying defensive resignation. He expected judgment, pearl-clutching outrage, thinly veiled disgust. Veronica's mouth opened, closed. The reflexive, "It's fine," refused to come. Because it wasn't fine. The water soaking through her dress carried memories she'd spent 15 years drowning in success. She'd built an empire on guilt's foundation, and now this child, this silent mirror, demanded she look at what she'd been running from. The father's hands moved again. Time to go. Signs carrying protectiveness tinged with shame. He reached for the girl's hand. Wait. The word escaped before strategy could intervene. The father froze, wary. Veronica stood, water dripping onto Italian leather. She stared at this 7-year-old who'd accidentally reopened wounds she'd convinced herself were scar tissue. The girl's hands moved faster, signing something to her father. His expression shifted through emotions before settling on reluctant curiosity. He signed back. The girl nodded emphatically, then pointed at Veronica. She knows. And Veronica's breath caught. The girl had recognized something in her face, understood that Veronica knew what it meant to love someone who communicated in signs. The father's eyes narrowed, reassessing. He straightened. Robert Foster. His voice carried rough edges of someone who worked with hands more than words. This is Hazel. The girl smiled, her whole face transforming. Robert's jaw tightened. We're sorry about your dress. If you give me your dry cleaning receipt, I'll cover the cost. The offer landed like a challenge, pride armoring every word. Veronica heard what he wasn't saying. She found herself nodding, accepting the fiction that his carpenter wages could cover this dress. Thank you. That's kind of you. Robert's eyebrows lifted, surprise flickering before he suppressed it. He pulled out a battered wallet, extracting a hand-printed business card. Foster Piano Restoration. Veronica accepted it, fingers brushing his calluses. Their eyes met, and something shifted. Hazel's hands moved, pulling Robert's attention. He hesitated, then nodded in apparent surrender. Hazel wants to know if you're okay. She's worried she hurt you. Veronica heard the unspoken question. Why haven't you yelled at us yet? What do you want from us? She lowered to Hazel's eye level, her wet dress pooling around her knees. Her hands lifted, muscle memory reaching back across years to forms she'd sworn never to use again. Her fingers formed signs slowly, rustily. I'm okay. Not hurt. Thank you for asking. Hazel's face transformed, eyes wide with astonishment. Then she was smiling with full-body joy. Her hands flew through response. You know. And you can talk, accompanied by such obvious delight that Veronica felt tears prickling. Robert stared. You know ASL. Not a question. Veronica straightened. I did. Once. It's been a long time. But Hazel wasn't constrained by adult caution. Her hands moved, asking who Veronica had known, why she'd stopped. Before Veronica could deploy polite dismissal, Hazel did something unexpected. She reached out and touched Veronica's hand, then signed one-handed. Sad, asking if the person was gone, if signing hurt too much. Veronica's breath stopped. This was the question Jessie had asked in different forms, the question she'd never answered adequately. Yes, I'm sad. The admission shattered her professional detachment, leaving her vulnerable to a child she'd met minutes ago. Hazel's expression shifted into understanding beyond her years. Her arms wrapped around Veronica's neck, body shaking with suppressed sobs for this stranger's grief. Robert watched with complex emotions cycling across his face. When Hazel pulled back, he cleared his throat. I should cancel today's work. We're late for Aunt Patricia's party. Veronica stood. Wait. Both turned. She looked at the business card, at the hand-printed letters. I have a piano. A Steinway, Concert Grand, 1962. I bought it 5 years ago because it looked impressive. I've never learned to play. Robert's expression shifted to professional assessment. Does it work? Veronica almost laughed. I have no idea. No one's touched it since delivery. Could you take a look? Tell me what it needs. The offer hung between them, transparently constructed but sincere, offering continued contact. Robert studied her, trying to identify manipulation. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. I can look at it. Consultation's free. He pulled out a carpenter's pencil. Address. Thursday arrived weighted with anticipation. Veronica left work at 2:30, having stocked hot chocolate, coloring books, crayons. The doorbell chimed at 2:30 sharp. Robert and Hazel stood slightly damp from November rain, Hazel brightening immediately. "Come in. I got some things for you, Hazel." The girl's eyes went wide at the dinosaur coloring book on the counter. She clutched it to her chest, signing rapidly to Robert, who laughed. Rusty, but genuine. "She says you have good taste. Velociraptors are her current obsession." Veronica watched the exchange, envying their passion. When was the last time she'd been excited about anything beyond strategic advantage? Robert's smile faded. "You okay?" Veronica nodded quickly. "Fine. Just nice to see someone so excited about dinosaurs." The statement sounded sad even to her. "When's the last time you let yourself get excited about anything?" Robert's question landed uncomfortably. Veronica opened her mouth to deflect, then stopped. "I don't know. College, maybe? Before Jessie died? I used to paint. Nothing good, but I enjoyed it." "Why'd you stop?" Robert unpacked tools with methodical precision. "Because Jessie was the artistic one. After he died, I couldn't. It felt wrong to create things when he couldn't anymore." Robert's hands stilled. He looked at her with pure exasperation. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You think he'd want you to stop painting? That's not honoring his memory. That's just punishing yourself for surviving." The words hit like physical blows. Robert continued. "My mum stopped gardening after my dad left, said it reminded her of him. 20 years not gardening. Month before she died, she said her biggest regret was letting him take gardening with her. I think about that a lot. About all the ways we punish ourselves for other people's choices." Veronica watched his hands move across the piano with gentle precision. "How'd you learn this?" Robert smiled slightly. "I was training for concert performance, full scholarship to Juilliard. Then Hazel was born, and her mother had severe postpartum depression. I deferred to help. Then Hazel turned 3, and a drunk driver T-boned us on her side. The impact crushed her vocal cords. Surgery saved her life, but couldn't restore her voice." Veronica's hand moved to her mouth. Robert's voice flattened. "Kelly couldn't handle having a disabled child. Tried for a few months, but the stares bothered her. She wanted normal. So she left for Arizona with Frank, who had perfectly healthy, perfectly verbal kids. His jaw worked. I couldn't go back to performance, couldn't leave Hazel with sitters who didn't know sign language, so I learned restoration instead. Turns out I like this better. Performance was about ego. This is about craftsmanship, taking something broken and making it beautiful again. The metaphor wasn't subtle." Veronica looked at Hazel, at this child who'd survived catastrophic injury and abandonment with her joy intact. "I need to stop trying to fix everything," Veronica said aloud. Robert paused. "That's weird for a CEO to say." "Fixing problems in business, sure, but I've been treating people like problems too. You don't need solving. Neither does Hazel." Robert's expression shifted to reluctant respect. "That's remarkably self-aware for someone who owns a building." Veronica laughed, actually laughed. "Most leaders think self-awareness means being aware of how right they are." Robert nodded seriously. "You're right. I'm not as self-aware as I thought. But I'm trying to be better." Robert studied her, then nodded. "That's all any of us can do. Weeks established rhythm." Veronica hadn't known she'd been missing. Tuesdays and Thursdays brought Robert and Hazel piano restoration filling space previously occupied by silence. Saturdays became signing practice. Veronica's assistant cornered her after 3 weeks. "You've cancelled 12 meetings this month. You left the Peterson acquisition early. What's going on?" Sandra's perfectly styled hair seemed to embody everything Veronica's life had been: controlled, professional, strategic. "I'm reprioritizing, making room for things that matter." Sandra looked incredulous. "Things that matter more than a $300 million acquisition?" Veronica felt defensive heat rising, then stopped. The truth was the acquisition didn't matter more. Yes, Delegate Peterson to Hammond. Sandra's mouth opened, closed. You've worked on this for 8 months. It's Hammond's deal now. I have other priorities. She walked away before Sandra could respond, feeling liberation mixed with terror. December brought crisis. Robert arrived with barely suppressed fury. Hazel's eyes red-rimmed. Hazel's school suggested she might be better served at a special needs facility, said her communication difficulties were disruptive. Veronica felt anger rising. On what grounds? Robert's laugh emerged bitter. She's reading at 5th grade level, math above average. They don't want to deal with an interpreter. It's easier to label her disruptive. Hazel's hands moved, signing to Veronica. Not wanted. And bother everyone. Veronica lowered to Hazel's level, signing carefully. You are wanted. You are not a bother. They are wrong. Hazel's chin trembled. Her hands formed. Why do they hate me? And Veronica felt something crack. This was Jessie's question in different forms. They don't hate you, they're afraid. Fear makes people cruel. But their fear is not your problem to fix. You are perfect exactly as you are. Hazel's arms wrapped around Veronica's neck. Robert watched with complex emotions. I should cancel today. But Veronica heard herself saying, Let me make some calls first. I know people on the Board of Education, lawyers who specialize in disability rights. Robert's expression shifted to something like betrayal. I don't need you to save us. I can handle this myself. The words carried accumulated defensiveness. Veronica recognized the trap. She'd assumed her resources made her the solution. You're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have assumed. She pocketed her phone. What do you need? How can I actually help instead of taking over? The question surprised Robert. He ran his hand through his hair. I don't know. Maybe I do need help. But I need to be part of the solution. If you really want to help me figure out strategy. Don't just do it for me. The distinction mattered. Veronica's business brain shifted to consultation mode. What have you tried? Robert showed her emails, bureaucratic deflection, suggestions that Robert was being unreasonable. They're building a case that you rejected accommodations, Veronica said. You need documentation too. Everything showing Hazel's performance, every failure to provide support. And allies, other parents, advocates. Robert said quietly, I'm not good at asking for help. Veronica understood that impulse. You're not asking too much. You're asking for the bare minimum. I know a lawyer who could review your documentation, help you understand options. But you make the decisions. Robert studied her, then nodded. Okay. Your fight. Your decisions. I'm just offering resources. Robert managed a faint smile. Thank you for not making me feel like I'm failing her. The following week brought developments faster than expected. Robert met with Veronica's lawyer, filed formal complaint. The disability advocacy group assigned a caseworker. 3 other parents came forward. The school's principal, facing potential federal investigation, scheduled an emergency meeting. Robert returned with written agreement. Hazel would remain in mainstream classroom with qualified interpreter. Teachers would receive ASL training. They folded completely, Robert told Veronica, his expression carrying satisfied disbelief. Couldn't have done it without your lawyer, so thank you for helping the right way. The gratitude carried acknowledgement of how much her restraint had mattered. When had someone last thanked her for holding back instead of charging forward? Winter settled with steady accumulation of routine. The piano restoration progressed toward completion. Veronica's piano lessons improved, but the real transformation was happening in spaces beyond pianos. Veronica found herself looking forward to Tuesdays and Thursdays with desperate anticipation. She'd catch herself watching the clock, calculating how quickly she could leave. Hazel's random text messages, photos of clouds, Dinosaur questions became lifelines. For the first time in 15 years, Veronica's life had texture beyond professional achievement. Her executive team noticed. Some remained disapproving, but others seemed relieved, commenting she was easier to work with, less controlling. Her assistant mentioned she'd started actually smiling. "You seem happy?" the assistant had said with careful uncertainty. Veronica realized with shock that she was happy. Not the manic satisfaction of closing deals, but actual contentment. It was terrifying. February brought the piano near completion. Robert estimated 2 more weeks. Veronica had reached the point where she could play simple pieces recognizably. Mrs. Chen suggested performing at the spring recital. The idea sent anxiety spiraling, but underneath ran something like excitement. That Thursday, Robert and Hazel arrived looking troubled. Robert's expression carried tension of problem with no clear solution. Hazel's interpreter gave notice. Moving to California. Schools having trouble finding replacement. Without interpreter, Hazel would be silenced. How long to find someone? Robert's expression darkened. District says 30 days. Realistically, could take months. Veronica's mind raced, but Robert's hand covered hers. Don't. There's no fixing it quickly. We just wait. Hazel's hands moved, asking if Veronica would teach her more advanced ASL to help her follow classes until they found someone new. Of course, we can practice every day if you want. They spent that afternoon working through complex vocabulary. After an hour, Hazel took a break, and Veronica found herself standing beside Robert at the piano. She shouldn't have to work this hard just to access basic education, Robert said quietly. She's 7. She should worry about playground politics, not whether she'll understand math lessons. Veronica heard the helplessness. You're right. It's not fair. But she's lucky she has you. Robert's expression twisted. Lucky isn't the word. She got a disabled kid package. Speech impediment, absent mother, broke father. Real lucky. The self-condemnation made Veronica want to shake him. She got a father who loves her unconditionally, who learned an entire language for her, who fights for her. That's not nothing, that's everything. Robert's hands stilled. You really believe that? The vulnerability broke something in Veronica's chest. I know it. Hazel knows it too. Hazel. Robert's eyes went bright. He blinked rapidly. They stood in silence, something unspoken building. Finally, Robert cleared his throat. The piano's almost done. Another week, maybe 2. Then I'll tune it. The statement carried weight. The piano's completion would mark the end of their arrangement. Veronica's stomach dropped. What happens after it's done? She asked, voice small. After the piano's finished? Robert's hands paused. He didn't look at her. I suppose that depends on whether you want us to keep coming around after there's no more work to do. Veronica's heart hammered. This was the moment. Getting involved would be complicated, potentially damaging. The smart thing would be to let them drift away. But 15 years of being smart had left her empty. I want you to keep coming around. Both of you. Not for piano work. Just because She stopped. I look forward to seeing you. Thursdays are my favorite days. Robert's hand stilled completely. He turned to face her. Veronica, I need you to be very clear. Veronica met his eyes. I'm saying I care about you. Both of you. More than I probably should. You've become important to me. The vulnerability felt like skinning herself alive. I understand if that makes you uncomfortable, but you asked me to be clear. I don't want you to stop coming around just because there's no piano left to fix. Robert stared, expression cycling through surprise and confusion. You're serious. Veronica, I'm a carpenter. I live in a barely affordable apartment. I have a daughter with disabilities requiring constant attention. I'm not part of your world. This doesn't make sense. She heard what he wasn't saying. You're too good for me. My world is exhausting, full of people who care about earnings and positioning. No one looks at me like I'm actual person instead of useful connection. No one challenges me when I'm wrong. No one has taught me that showing up matters more than fixing everything. She stepped closer. I don't want my world. I want yours. I want Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays. I want whatever version of my life includes both of you. Robert's breathing went shallow. What about Hazel? Getting involved with me means getting involved with her. Interpreter shortages, school battles. Your life gets complicated. The warning carried weight. I know. I want that too. All of it. Robert closed his eyes briefly, something like surrender crossing his features. I care about you too. I've been trying not to because it seemed impossible. But Hazel loves you, draws you into her pictures, signs about you constantly, and I think about you more than is probably appropriate. The admission hung charged with possibility. Veronica's hand touched his arm gently. So what do we do? Robert looked at her hand, then her face. I guess we figure it out. But Hazel comes first. Always. If this becomes bad for her, we stop, no matter how we feel. The boundary was absolute. Agreed. Hazel's well-being is the priority. Robert nodded. Okay then, we'll figure this out. Veronica felt joy flooding her chest. She started to lean in when a book dropped. They sprang apart. Hazel watched with knowing expression, hands moving with elaborate casualness, asking about snacks. The weeks that followed were strange territory. They didn't go on traditional dates. Robert couldn't afford her usual restaurants, and taking Hazel seemed cruel. Instead, they spent time at the penthouse, or occasionally Robert's tiny apartment, full of Hazel's artwork and woodworking projects. Veronica learned to cook simple meals, learned dinners with 7-year-olds involved dinosaur facts and school drama. She learned Robert sang when he worked, had perfect pitch. She learned Hazel had nightmares about the accident. She learned Robert's parents disapproved of his prioritizing Hazel over career, had suggested institutional care. The suggestion resulted in 3 years of minimal contact. Veronica understood family who loved conditionally. She learned integration required flexibility. Hazel's therapy schedule meant plans changed constantly. Robert's income fluctuated. Veronica learned to navigate pride that made him refuse financial help while finding ways to contribute, stocking groceries, discovering extra tickets, winning gift certificates. The dance preserved Robert's dignity while acknowledging massive economic inequality. The piano reached completion in late March, wood gleaming, every note perfectly voiced. Robert played a scale, the sound crystal pure. It's beautiful, Veronica said, meaning the metaphor, something neglected slowly restored through patient attention. I have my recital in 2 weeks. Veronica added nervously. Mrs. Chen says I'm ready. Robert's eyebrows lifted. You're performing? In front of people? Veronica nodded. Adult student recital. Very low stakes, but terrifying. Robert's expression shifted tender. We'll be there. Front row if they let us. Veronica felt tears prickling. You don't have to. We want to. This matters to you, which means it matters to us. The recital arrived. Veronica's hands trembled with pre-performance nerves. She'd performed plenty of presentations to hostile boardrooms, but this felt different, personal, public imperfection. She peeked through curtains, spotted Robert and Hazel in 3rd row. Hazel wore a purple dress, hair in elaborate braids, clutching grocery store carnations clearly purchased with saved allowance. When had anyone brought her flowers for something beyond business? Her turn came. She walked onto stage, sat at the piano. For a moment, panic threatened. Then she caught Hazel signing, "You can do this!" and Robert smiling with uncomplicated pride. She took a breath, began to play. The first measures were mechanical, but gradually she sank into music. Not perfect, she stumbled over transitions, but it was hers. The final chord hung before applause erupted. She'd been publicly imperfect and survived. Robert and Hazel found her after. Hazel pressed carnations into her hands with solemn ceremony, hands moving through elaborate praise. Robert pulled her into a hug. "I'm proud of you. That took real courage." Veronica felt something crack, some last armor dissolving. She'd spent 15 years terrified of public imperfection. But standing here with Robert's arms around her and Hazel's flowers clutched in her hands, she realized perfection was the most boring prison. Summer arrived. Hazel finished 3rd grade with excellent marks. The interpreter situation resolved. Veronica continued piano lessons, signed up for painting class, discovered she was still mediocre but no longer cared. Her executive team adjusted to reduced hours, rose to increased responsibility. The company thrived despite, or because of, her step back. Robert's lease came up in June. Veronica suggested, carefully, that maybe they might consider moving into her penthouse. Space was absurd for one person, had 3 bedrooms she'd never used. Robert's initial response was predictable refusal, pride demanding independence. But Hazel's eyes went wide with hope. The practical advantages were undeniable. No commute, better school district, rent savings. It took 2 weeks of negotiation, Robert insisting he pay rent he could afford, insisting on separate finances, clear boundaries. Veronica agreed to everything, recognizing these negotiations preserved his self-worth in relationship structured by massive inequality. They moved in late July. The penthouse transformed from sterile perfection into lived-in warmth. Hazel's art on walls, Robert's furniture scattered among designer objects, the piano occupying its place of honor. August brought crisis. Jesse's death anniversary fell on the 15th. Veronica had spent 15 years treating it as ordinary business day. But this year, surrounded by people who'd taught her feeling grief wasn't weakness, the strategy failed. She woke with Jesse's absence pressing like physical weight. Robert found her on the bathroom floor, tears streaming. He didn't ask questions, just sat beside her, shoulder touching hers, presence solid. Eventually she told him everything. About finding Jesse's body, about guilt, about building empire on that foundation because achieving things felt like the only way to make his death mean something, about how exhausting it was to carry success as memorial. Robert listened, then spoke quietly. "Jesse wouldn't want you to carry this forever. You've built something incredible, but for the wrong reasons. Maybe it's time to figure out what you actually want to build." The question stayed with Veronica through fall. What did she want to build? She started researching non-profits focused on disability advocacy and suicide prevention. In October, she approached Robert with proposal, a foundation named after Jesse, providing resources for families with deaf or non-verbal children. Grants for interpreters, ASL scholarships, system navigation support. Robert listened carefully, then asked, "Why?" Not suspicious, wanting to understand. Because Hazel shouldn't fight as hard as she does for basic accommodation. Because parents like you shouldn't choose between career and adequate support. Because Jesse deserved better. And I can't change that. But maybe I can make it easier for others? She paused. And because I need to build something that matters beyond profit margins. Robert pulled her into a hug. "Jesse would be proud of you. I'm proud of you." The foundation launched in January. Veronica stepped back from CEO, moving to chairman role, preserving strategic oversight while freeing her for foundation work. The executive team rose to the challenge. The company continued thriving. Veronica found herself measuring success in different metrics: families served, interpreters trained, children accessing resources. It was harder than running a company, less quantifiable, more draining. It was also more meaningful. Spring arrived with excessive blooming enthusiasm. Veronica stood in Laurence for the first time since the night she'd met Robert and Hazel, having rented the space for private event. The foundation was hosting its first fundraiser here, where everything had changed. Robert appeared in the doorway wearing suit, Hazel beside him in purple dress. Hazel had practiced a speech in ASL explaining what adequate interpreter access meant to students like her. Robert crossed to Veronica, eyes taking in the transformation. Tables with foundation materials, silent auction items, banner bearing Jesse's name and mission statement. "This is incredible," he said with awe. Veronica shook her head. "It's a start. Small, but a start." Robert's hand found hers. "From small starts, big changes. Look at us. We started with spilled water and a piano. Now we have this. Have each other. Have something worth building on." Veronica turned to face him fully, struck by how much had changed in 15 months. She'd been alone then, successful but hollow. Now she stood surrounded by people who'd shown her different metrics. Showing up mattered more than fixing. Being present mattered more than being perfect. Building community mattered more than accumulating wealth. "I love you," she said with certainty. "Both of you. More than I thought I could love anyone." Robert's expression transformed. "I love you too. Thank you for spilling water on that dress. Best disaster that ever happened to me." Hazel's hands moved. She'd finished practicing, ready for the fundraiser to start. Veronica looked at this child who'd become hers in every way that mattered, who'd taught her that strength wore different faces. Hazel signed a question, asking if Jesse would have liked the foundation, if he would have been happy. Veronica's throat tightened. She knelt to Hazel's level, hands forming signs with practiced fluency. "Yes, he would have loved this, would have loved you, both of you." Hazel's face lit with complete joy. She threw her arms around Veronica's neck, and Veronica held her, this precious person who'd accidentally saved her by needing nothing except to be seen as whole. The fundraiser began. By evening's end, grants were funded. 3 families received immediate assistance. They'd made a difference, small but real. Late that night, back in the penthouse transformed into actual home, Veronica sat at the piano Robert had restored. Her fingers moved across familiar keys, playing a piece she'd learned purely for enjoyment. Robert sat nearby with woodworking, hands shaping wood while hers shaped sound. Hazel had fallen asleep on the couch, dinosaur book clutched in her hands, face peaceful. Veronica looked at them. This carpenter and his mute daughter who'd accidentally walked into her failed blind date and demolished every wall she'd spent 15 years constructing, and felt gratitude so intense it bordered on religious experience. She'd spent years believing success meant never needing anyone, that strength meant solving every problem alone. But they'd taught her different truths, that accepting help was courage, that being vulnerable was strength, that meaningful successes were measured in moments rather than milestones. The piano keys felt smooth under her fingers, each note ringing clear thanks to Robert's restoration. She thought about Jesse, about what he might think of the life she'd built from his death's rubble. She hoped he'd be proud, hoped he'd see she'd finally learned his lesson, that being seen and loved for who you actually were mattered more than any achievement. The foundation bearing his name would help others, but more importantly, it represented her finally transforming grief into something other than guilt. Finally, letting Jesse's memory be about love instead of failure. Robert looked up from his woodworking. "You okay?" Veronica nodded, smiling with uncomplicated happiness. "Better than okay. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Robert set down his tools, crossed to the piano, settled beside her. His arm wrapped around her shoulders, and they sat in comfortable silence while her fingers wandered across keys. Hazel stirred on the couch, signing sleepily. "Love you," directed at both of them without specification. Because that's what Veronica had become. Hazel's second parent, chosen rather than biological, but no less real. The city lights glittered beyond windows, the same view Veronica had stared at for 5 years, while feeling nothing except hollow satisfaction. But the view looked different now, seen from inside a life actually lived. She'd failed her 23rd blind date spectacularly that night, had been preparing to leave when Robert and Hazel stumbled in. She'd thought she was helping them, but they'd been helping her, teaching her how to be human again, how to let herself need and be needed, how to build life on love's foundation instead of guilt's. Veronica's fingers found the opening notes of her recital piece. She played it better now, more confident, but with less concern about perfection. The music was about the attempt, the willingness to create, despite knowing it would be flawed. Robert's hand found hers on keys, pressing notes in harmony, and together they created something neither perfect nor impressive, but wholly theirs. Outside, the city continued its endless motion, full of people seeking connection, seeking purpose. She hoped they found what she'd found, that sometimes the best things came from disasters you didn't plan for, from moments when life refused to follow your roadmap, from the willingness to let strangers become family and family become home.